Arts Film Club in partnership with Big Picture Film Club. I'm your host, Urvisha. Every month, we aim to discuss films from a curated selection of award-winning and critics' choice titles available on the platform. This month, we are championing women's voices in film, and are very lucky to be joined by a panel of amazing women who work in film. I'd like to introduce everyone: Victoria Thomas, Jane Gull, Kirsty Bell, Sadie Frost, Trinity, Tristan. Welcome, everyone. Thank you for joining us.
Hi.
Hello.
Hello.
How is everyone?
So thanks for inviting us all. I'm Sadie. I'm a producer, director, actor, and designer.
I'm Kirsty Bell. I'm CEO of Goldfinch, and I've worked with all these ladies around this table tonight. I'm very pleased to be one of them.
I'm Trinity Tristan, and I'm an artist and a writer, and then a costume designer and a production designer, and have worked with a couple of these girls as well, and they're all looking great tonight. So hello.
I'm Jane Gull. I'm a writer-director. I've worked with Kirsty on my first feature film, which was called My Feral Heart, and currently in pre-production for my next one, which we're shooting in 6 weeks.
Ooh, well done.
And I'm Victoria Thomas. I'm a writer, director, producer, and I also am the course director for the Masters in International Film Business program at London Film School. And I'm currently working with Kirsty and Goldfinch and First Flight, who've just funded my short.
Amazing. Thank you so much for joining us. Today we wanted to have this event and kind of explore where women in film stand currently, the culture of women in film, and everything that shapes how we view women in media. So if we can kind of start off, maybe Sadie, you've got a great history of working behind and in front of the camera. If you can give us some examples of how you broke in to the industry, how you might have secured funding, distribution, just how you got through the process of creating content and getting it out into the world.
I mean, I've definitely been on such a long journey and been involved in film for like 5 decades and seen such a huge change. I guess I started acting as a child actor and would be in quite big productions at Shepperton Studios, and it was a completely different world then. It was incredibly male. It was, you know, being a woman a young girl on set, you know, I was always feeling slightly intimidated. You know, there was very few female roles at that time, or things were very limited. And then all the crew was male, apart from maybe the makeup artist and the costume designer sometimes. So then I kind of, you know, I went through different parts of my career and then ended up kind of really wanting to have more control and have my own voice. And that's why I started a production company with a friend of mine called Emma Comley. And we wanted to tell stories about outside, people don't normally get stories told about them. And, you know, again, we realized we're in a very male world. We were up against, you know, we're getting finance and kind of dealing with EIS, kind of setting things like that up and different finance structures. It was a very male, and there was often lots of very kind of chauvinistic, kind of big boys club kind of scenario. And, you know, I just always wanted to have a strong voice and wanted to fight for my kind of say and keep going. But I think, like, looking back now, I mean, things are definitely changing, and there's some great, brilliant female directors and producers, and there's more opportunities. But, you know, and we can be braver and we can be stronger and we can support each other, but there's still a lot of room for change. There is still, you know, I see a lot around me, the big boys club around me, and it really makes me want to throw up. You know, a lot of companies don't support women on the higher level. And, you know, I still kind of feel like I, you know, I'm against misogynist kind of remarks and sexist remarks. So I think the thing is, it's like brilliant to do things like this today and talk about it and discuss it and be aware that, you know, it is sometimes harder for women. We do need to be supported when we are raising families. You know, I did a master's and I went to rain dance, and then to do a master's at Stafford University, and my thesis was on how women, how so many female directors found it so hard to do their second film because they'd started a family. And, I work with producers like Rebecca O'Brien and quite a few kind of, oh God, it's completely gone out of my head, but some other, really highbrow, well-known producers to talk about how, often they couldn't start families or they only had one child. But it's interesting how some women feel like having children and a family doesn't affect their career, and other women feel like it does. But for me, I think women need support in the childcare and in that side of the industry. Yeah.
Great. That's a great sort of topic to touch on, because there's always that finding that balance of career and family. And how do you think we can show support for families and women in the industry who have families and might feel like there's a struggle in balancing the two?
I mean, I do know that some of the bigger studios now have creches and stuff, which is great, and they do, there is more allowance for that and support. And I think maybe, given kind of, opportunities when you go back to work. I know for me, having 4 children, every time I went off and had a couple of years and then went back to work, it was so much harder, and there always seemed to be certain prejudices against me for wanting to have had a family. But the thing about being a woman is you're so brilliant at multitasking, so you can do kind of, I could do so many different things, and want to produce, go and pick up the kids, then write something, then start thinking about directing. So I think all of us sitting around here are kind of strong, powerful women. And, I don't know, and it sounds terrible if I say this, but many men that can multitask like I can, or any of you guys can. So, I just feel like we just need to get, brilliant, strong stories. And, I do feel like I'm seeing some amazing talent emerge, young talent, like, you have people like Lucy Preble and Billie Piper, and, they're not afraid of kind of really revealing things about themselves. And Emerald Fennell, her film looks amazing. And I look at my daughter's generation, and I'm just seeing like a really strong kind of set of brave women that are going to really take on the world. And I think it's good that we've kind of paving the way. I do see that there's a lot more to be done, but I do believe it will happen.
Do you find these women in the classroom, Victoria, when you're teaching, and the same for you, Kirsty, when you're funding movies or finding projects to invest in? How is that coming through in the creative side?
I was going to say, Victoria, you go first about the classroom.
Yeah, I mean, to be honest, I'm so I don't want to sound patronizing, but I'm so proud of this sort of younger generation, because I went to film school, both NFTS and Edinburgh College of Art, and we did not have the courage to say a lot of what I see the young women in the film school saying now. For example, I was so proud of going to a student council meeting and having the women challenge the curriculum, because even film school curriculums are quite problematic with what is put forward as the canon and classic films that we should all aspire to. And so you see a lot of young people taking advantage of the technology that we have nowadays, the fact that they're so much more open-minded, and the internet, and they don't have the same diversity issues that our generation seems to have, because they're so open-minded with the stories that they're telling, and they're really taking risks. I love the fact that I see 21, 22-year-olds referring to themselves as producers and cinematographers. I have people who are older who still don't want to give themselves titles, especially women, because they also apologize for their skills. So I think, I definitely think things are changing in the world of education. You can see it in the younger generation, that there's definitely this excitement, this wave. And I think it's also, everything that we've been fighting for. I think in the next 10 years, I think it's going to be such a different landscape out there.
I totally agree. I mean, I came to the film world, the media world, very late in life. And, I was a single mum from a very young age, and went into a job that was secure, or what I perceived to be secure. And all the things that Sadie is saying, I experienced all of that boys club in that exact same scenario in the professions. So I didn't really help myself. All I got was a monthly wage, as it were, rather than the freelance nightmare that we find ourselves in filmland. And I think you are judged, you're prejudged, whether you've got children or not. There's a presumption that you might have children, or you might have to be the person who isn't the main wage earner, that you're almost not worthy. And this is why the retention of women in the filmmaking world is so poor, because they look for more security, they look for environments where they're more accepted. And I definitely think that all of the work that all of us around this table and more of us besides have done over the last 10 years has paved the way for Iris's generation, Sadie, for the others too. But what I will say is that the people around this table are supported by men as well. And, in all of our businesses, some of our biggest supporters, Jane, on your film, James was your biggest supporter on that, and Duncan as well, Yeah. And it's like, we can't ignore that the biggest thing that one of the questions that we were asked to consider is that, my CEO is male and is actually my son, the son that I was single mum to. But we are equal and equivalent. His view is just as worthy as my view. Sadie, your business partner is male. Andrew, you've and they different skill sets.
I couldn't have done, and I just have to say that, my business partner Andrew Green, even though he's given me the ability to tell female stories, which has been great, and he has taken a risk with kind of starting up a company and financing that. So, definitely. But there's not that many men that will support women in that way, but there are some brilliant men that do.
But also, my clearer example is that not only did I come to set Goldfinch up out the blue 7 years ago, but last year with the lockdown and everything, I got the opportunity, came up with an idea. I got the opportunity to do what you did, Jane. I had a first feature film to direct. And that was the scariest thing in my life. And the two people who supported me the most was my son, Philip, who looked after Goldfinch while I was doing it. And I couldn't have done it if he hadn't. And Ben Charles Edwards, who was the producer on that. And if he hadn't guided me through that, through a very scary time in history, bear in mind, we were doing PPE, we all had to adhere to everything. I don't think I would have got there. And I believe in team, there's no, and the team approach and women helping women, I'm from the generation where women didn't necessarily help women in the workplace. And I've seen a change. I've seen more support happening. I've seen it on sets. I've seen it, but I haven't seen it yet in the finance world. And that's one of the questions that I haven't seen it in the finance world, and I definitely haven't seen it in the sales and distribution world. And that is where there needs to be some change, because I feel like my kit bag doesn't have any tools in it with regard to distribution, other than I know a lot of people. And I rely on our reputation, and I rely on the older relationships that we started when we first started Goldfinch, and I also rely on the team at Goldfinch, which Philip heads up on that side of things. On the finance side, it's me that heads it up, and I've had to kick and scream and push and befriend and convince and talk to people time and time again. Probably work 10 times as hard as some of the old boys network to get accepted. When I turned up in London 7 years ago and tried to raise money, they were the same old boys school, has been mentioned several times, were just like sticking two fingers up at me the whole time, going, who the hell's she? Who does she think she is? A Geordie girl coming down from Newcastle expecting to set up a film company. And we nearly failed. We honestly nearly failed. And that's why we support first-time directors. That's why we support anybody who wants to try out and film, how we'll help them, guide them, and try and get them out there, and especially women.
I think that's Kirsty, I can really relate to that, because I think I was given a bit of advice a few years ago, and somebody said to me, if you want to get if you want to get on in the film world, learn to play golf or go and join the local cricket club or something, because that's where most of the deals are done. And I think, like, the thing, like you said earlier, Kirsty, it was 6 years ago that we shot Feral. And I think there seems to be a lot of sort of schemes and labs and things for emerging filmmakers. But it's that, you know, getting your second film made, or having that longevity, or being able to make, you know, 10 films and being allowed to make have a flop, or, you know, something that doesn't, you know, try different things. Yeah, so I mean, yeah, trying to get my second film made has been quite a challenge, but, you know, I'm doing it. So
I feel really strongly about that as well, because actually, as like, I'm here championing women, but also I'm a trans woman, and so I find that it can be, you have people throwing and screaming and shouting and stuff at you the whole time, and you're still trying to edge yourself in as a woman, essentially, but also then you have this other history behind you that is also being thrown against you. So there's a lot of voices that can come over you and that can shout over you, and it turns into a can often turn into like a shouting match. But where does that that masculinity versus femininity come into it? Because it's really difficult in my experience that I could never really do what I wanted to do, but still I pushed and I screamed. And I did have exactly what you said as well, Kirsty. But with Ben, he championed me, and also you, Sadie, you were on my first ever shoot. It was The Ways of Seeing years and years and years ago, and Ben gave me a chance on that, and then I've actually managed to work on so many things since then, and he's always championed me since then as well. So
Trin, do you feel that you get judged differently to a woman because you're a trans woman?
Definitely, absolutely, definitely, because there's a masculine and feminine energy, and so there's always a tie, and there's always a mispronunciation, or there's always something, or there's also always, there's still those sexual remarks that you were referring to, Sadie, or there's still those other things, but then it kind of gets put into like a banter phase. And covering also what I mean, I do a lot of masculine roles as such, you know, working in production design, where you're having to do set builds. They're very hard labor, hard hours, you know, in comparison to when I do costume. But you're building and you're working with people who need things done and need results, and you need them quickly. And you're the, like, you know, art department is the one that's, you know, first on set, last to leave. And if you kind of around those people who are kind of like just shouting at you, there is a lot of like discrimination about it. And you do start to feel a little bit kind of, you know, how you feel a bit pained by it. And it can, but you never let it get you down, because you always have to go forward. Do you know what I mean? You always have to.
Well, I think the intersectionality is a thing, you know, because even though I'm a woman, I'm also Black and of African descent, and that poses its own challenges. Minorities you're trying to tell, because again, even within the female spaces in Europe, I am still a minority, you know, and at times you sort of miss that creative fluency, you know, when you're talking to executives or gatekeepers who don't necessarily understand the stories that you're trying to tell or the perspectives. And there's this constant pressure to almost like translate. And so you spend more time explaining what you're trying to do for somebody supposed to just bouncing ideas of other people. And, you know, and it can be quite frustrating and very exhausting. So I completely get what you mean, Trinity, but the intersectionality is a thing which is often overlooked, you know, even within the female spaces.
I agree.
And how do you feel with where we are now? Do you feel there are significant changes yet to come? What do they need to look like? How do we ensure that moving forward there is space for us all to exist? There is resource for us all, access to that resource, with all the varied experiences and the backgrounds, and then again mentioning the intersectionality of race and gender, and all of these things all come to play, and they do make a big impact on whether or not you do have access to all the things you need to get your content out there. So just anything you can share in terms of what you've experienced, do you feel like we can move forward with?
I personally think that globally there has been a massive sea change in the last 5 years in particular. I think with the Me Too movement and with Black Lives Matters and people paying attention to diversity and to everything that we all embody around this table. And I think that is a brilliant thing. But sometimes I think it's more that it's paying lip service to the creative, but not actually delving into how do you get these bloody films made. And I used to get criticised, setting a Goldfinch. Goldfinch aren't interested in the commerciality of a film, only interested in the commerciality of the film. They're not interested in the creativity. I tell you something, we 100% are interested in the creativity, because if the creativity is there, then effectively the commerciality probably will be there as a result of it. And I think it's getting people to talk, like-minded people, to help each other on that commercial side. And I don't just mean sales, I mean financing of the projects. You know, there's 3 pillars, isn't there? There's the financing, there's the production itself, and then there's the distribution. And often we concentrate on the middle one, the production. I think we got that one done. I think what we need to make sure is that we've got these other 2 pillars sorted. And that's where we need to make more inroads, and we need to harness people who want to support, you know, all of the diversity that we represent and help us to get forward. And that's what I've tried to do in a very, very small way with Goldfinch. And what I know Sadie's done as well. I know Trin, you have, Jane, you've gone, I'm a female director, I'm going to get my 2nd film made. In Victoria with your short, you know, which is about specific, you know, really not a subject that people want to hear about necessarily. And I'll let you tell people about that. But, you know, and that's why we had to support Victoria. Not only was it a brilliant subject matter, but it was also a very good script. So, you know, it's about how do we educate people on the financial side of matters and bring that together with the creative, because that's what it is. It's the film industry, it's show business. And we don't tend to operate as like that. That's how it has to be. I get off my high horse now.
I mean, things have changed a lot in the last few years when you're kind of going through different processes of, and applying for funding. You know, the applications are, you know, there's a lot of, you know, boxes to be ticked, and to make sure you're really balancing out, you know, gender and race and everything. You know, for us, you know, for me as well, when I'm working on a production, I want to be giving, you know, giving a real variety of interns an opportunity, not, you know, just making sure that everybody gets a chance. And you know, it's something I've always been aware of, you know, just being kind of a young girl from Camden Town that used to hang out kind of in the kind of, there used to be like interesting kind of workshops at the Roundhouse, and places where like we could go if we, you know, didn't, you know, there'd be, you know, little workshops and organizations that help people like in Queen's Crescent. And I work with a lot of the charities there now myself. I put back in because when I was growing up, I needed to be given those opportunities, because I wouldn't have, I got a scholarship to go to stage school, and I wouldn't have, you know, had that opportunity to be an actor unless I got a scholarship. And that's kind of why it's always been really important for me to look at, you know, putting back and you know, giving opportunities. And you know, if I can grow my business, for me it would be giving grants. And you know, for me, it's educated a young boy in South Africa to go through film school, who now is a filmmaker. So it's not like, it isn't for me about what I can do. It is about really putting it all out there for other people and giving other people an opportunity in a life that they would never have been able to have, because I got that given to me. And I think the problem with this industry and any industry that makes money in certain areas is that people are in it for the money and the ego. And for me, it is about kind of sharing it out and giving, you know, spreading the love and giving people opportunities and
shred the ego.
Pardon?
Shred the ego.
Shred the ego, you know, and you know that's what keeps me going. It's not the other side of it, you know, the whole kind of other hoity-toity bit, you know. It's the real nitty-gritty stuff that kind of interests me. So I think we just all have to be aware that we can help other people and make a difference, and you know, that's why I'm always reading, you know, short films, young people approaching me for help, and hopefully I give it as much as I can.
That's great news to hear, because I think there are massive opportunities for education, mentoring, and interning, and all those kind of hands-on learning opportunities. And we've noticed a trend of funding being cut, lack of access, and now with COVID hitting us and there being no physical space for people to meet, I think there's a great opportunity for us to start creating our own spaces, and perhaps something growing from that.
I think you're definitely right, Urvisha. I mean, the other thing is that one of the things you said earlier, you know, that people calling themselves a producer when they're 23 and they've never produced anything. When I first produced, it was by default. My producer walked away, didn't think the funding was there, and it was. And they walked off, and it was it. I was it. Like, there was nobody else at such short notice. And I opened the dictionary, looked up producer, and it said to produce. It was like, what? Like, really? And you know, I'd only ever been involved on the financial side of things, and it was a baptism of fire and dreadful. Like, what could go wrong did go wrong, you know, all of the rest of it, you know. And that's when I decided to move down to London to set up Gull, because I thought, I've had the best education I could possibly have, and shadowing somebody who is experienced, taking the knocks, getting the opportunities, which is, you know, that's practical experience, is what you can't beat it, can you? And all of us should be able to give back in that respect, just like Sadie says. And all of us, you know, I've been talking to members of our team saying the next production we go ahead with, we should have somebody shadowing some of the key roles, so they can see, you know, they might think they want to be a producer, but I tell you something, producers like the shittest job on the planet. You get.
For me, when I went over, I got offered an opportunity to work with Erica Lust, who creates a lot of porn for women, basically, and more beautiful realizations of it. So I made the first orgasm after transition into a film. And I realized from that, so I went out to LA and made this film, and actually it's very beautiful and I do love it and I'm very proud of it. But I realized from that, I was like, I'm not a director. And I don't want to direct. I don't, because I had to produce and direct and do all the things. But I realized from that, I didn't want to. So I think it's great that you do a shadowing like internship, because I think it would be amazing if people can see if they can do something.
And I think Trinity doing that instead of being a runner, you know, runners is an important one. You get to see all the different roles and you get to understand how the AD unit operates with the production office and all the rest of it. But actually shadowing some of the key heads of department or the producer or the director, I think would be a brilliant thing. You know, if we could say that on every production, I'm talking about we as a collective here, on every production, we had either the producer, the director role, or the first AD role, which is crucial to the operation of the actual set, but also getting somebody to see it past filming, get to see what happens in prep, how the finance plan works, how the post-production operates, how the bloody thing gets sold at the end of the day, you know, overseeing the whole process. And that to me was the best education I could have. Yeah. By default. And I think it would be, for me, it was pivotal. And I think for anybody who's thinking about going into the film industry or thinking of doing a producer role, I think it's really, really important. And to love your line producer. That's the person you should love the most in the entire world.
I think there's also a mobility issue, because I think there are lots of opportunities for young people or entry-level jobs. I think it's that being able to move on from that as well, it can be a stumbling block for a lot of people, just the same way it's quite difficult to get your second feature off the ground. You know, people go, because we're also dealing with an industry that's highly subjective, entertainment, you know, it's very subjective. You know, there's certain films I probably will never make, not because they're not good, but because it's just not my taste. So I think we also need to look at the diversity in the gatekeeping, like who's making the decisions, who's financing, because you're going to back the things that you love. And then also the importance of mentoring or champions in the industry. So you can come in and you can shadow, but when you're done, who is going to champion you to get the next job or to move up the rung? Because again, we're in an industry where we all hire people we know because it's so risky and you kind of want that comfort, you know? And so I think when people who are not from the dominant culture, I think that's where the disadvantages begin to come in. So you can get a lot of people come in, we can all do internships, but then you get stuck. Like Jenny mentioned schemes, like I've been on so many schemes and I know people who, that's all they've ever done is scheme after scheme after scheme.
You keep scheming, you never actually get to the point where you're earning the money.
Exactly.
Like, you need the money to survive and to do what you want to do.
Still not earning the money.
Well, if you're not saying
Me either.
Need it for the money, but the thing is, it's like also you have to generate your own work as well, and that's what I have noticed. I mean, when I was you know, kind of quite a few years back, you could only be one thing. I remember I was acting, and then you couldn't go into being a, you know, it was really frowned upon to multitask and do different things. America was always much more accepting. They always gave you, but in England, we like to put people down. It's not like that anymore. I mean, again, I look at my kids, you know, they just have an idea and they go and, oh, let's make a video. Let's go and do this. Let's go and do that. And they just go off and do it. And they don't care if they're going to make mistakes or that they make mistakes. They know it's about the experience. And the only way you get good is by making mistakes and getting the experience and learning. And, you know, and just keep going. You know, there's so many, you know, I have such good days in this industry, and other days I'm just literally on the floor, just like, how can I pick myself up and get through this, whether it's producing or directing or trying to get something financed. But you just have to keep going until you know, I mean, for me, you know, I'm definitely out the other side at some point and I want to go and live on a mountain and meditate, but you know, there's still a few films in me. But I just say to anybody that wants to do it, you know, persevere, keep going. And if, like, the amount of young, amazing people that send me scripts, and, you know, sometimes I can't get back to everybody and I feel but just keep going, just keep emailing and trying to kind of send your, you know, the work that there is, and eventually someone will give you that break. But you can't just do it 1 or 2 times. You have to, you know, the amount of doors I knocked on when I was doing my master's and I wanted to interview like 30, 40 female producers to get for my thesis, you know, I just had to keep, like, you know, keep emailing, keep knocking on the door, and eventually I got like 3 amazing responses. So, you know, that's my advice, is you just have to keep going. And yeah, I mean, that's the only way, because it's a very competitive industry and it's changing now. An independent film, you know, it's difficult because people are, you know, now it's having a relationship with the streamers, and that's just a real key club to just even get your films even read by people, because they have the same people that they just greenlight projects with. So, you know, there definitely needs to be, you know, coming out of this transition and what's going to happen. There needs to be more forums about that, and giving, I know we have, you know, the BFI and certain people supporting independent film, but there still has to be more support.
I think it's showing people as well, Sadie, that independent film can work at the right budget level, with the right content, with the right cast and the right people involved. It's getting it to work. You know, there isn't a set formula that, you know, you do it for X amount of budget and it has Y results. It isn't that. There's lots of component elements. And if you can, I mean, on Jane's directorial debut, you know, it was made for a pittance, bless her. And the standard, that what is on the screen is absolutely phenomenal. The acting's great, the script's great, the cinematography's great, the direction's great, all the rest of it. And it did not lose, you know, its money. It got its money back. And that's why I set up Gullfinch in the first. It was to prove to people you can actually put hard cash into a film and you can actually get it back. That's,
And
you might get a bit of a profit, you might not, but you can get it back, and it's
then
really
Jane had to wait, you know, how many 6 years to do her second feature, which was, you know,
I
when
know.
she was on a high and done this amazing thing, not to get the support for her second film, you know, within a couple of years is not fair. But things like that have to change.
Sadie, what you were saying about it's just you have to get on with it and do it yourself, and that's exactly what I've done. I thought, you know, you can't, no one, you know, just because you've made one film, you've got to, you know, get out there and do your second one. So I've teamed up with an amazing female producer, Karen Newman, some of my creative team from Feral. And during COVID, I've written the script and it's all good to go. Because, yeah, I thought now's the time. Sorry.
Can I just say, was COVID not like the best thing for creativity ever? I mean, I'm sorry, but did it not just put us in a place where we all had to just get on with something?
Yeah,
And
Totally.
I think it was marvelous.
Totally agree. Totally agree.
Close to wrapping up, guys. But before we do wrap up, we have a couple of questions from people who have emailed and just messaged in. So the first question is from Millie Hayward. How should an aspiring writer approach finding producers or directors to take on their script? How do they go about getting someone being on a project?
Kirsty wants on.
Well, Goldfinch, we've got a very open submissions process. We're blind to who it is that actually submits, really. And, you know, it can be a script, it can be a treatment even, it can be something that's got lots of elements put together with it. But the submissions team, which Sarah heads up, she'll immediately look at it. Then there's a meeting where all the submissions for that week are assessed by the whole team. Apart from me, I get excluded, and and then they eventually get to me. And I think that's a really good way, because, you know, there's sometimes a diamond in the rough. You know, you just never know what's going to come across your door. And that's why we set up the Short Film Fund. And that's why we've got the Shorts channel on birdbox.film, because we think that, you know, proving concept with the short as a new director is a marvelous way of getting yourself almost like a business card to show what you're capable of. And if the subject matters are really good, one of the scripts really strong, you never know, that might end up being a feature film down the line. But also, it's getting people on our radar. It's getting people that are up and coming that we don't know. You know, we only know so people deal with people, don't they? So, as we've all said, you all deal with the same people again and again and again because you're used to it. This sort of widens our vista, and you know, we've found some really good diamonds in the rough over the years, and I think. Keep submitting, you know, not just to us, you know, to sort of submit to, you know, the larger producers, but also the smaller producers who've probably got their slate, but they'll probably look at if it's a good script or a good idea, they will look at it. You know, we get 20-25 submissions a week. Some of them are dreadful, I have to say, you know, but we always go back. We always, you know, give some kind of feedback, because that's important. Put it into a box, you know, but like posting it into the post box with no destinations, rubbish, isn't it? It's demoralizing. Whereas if somebody at least interacts with you and you think that your project is getting a bit of a look in, I think it's very important for your soul. And also, you're on a freelance journey, aren't you? So we've got to be able to, you know, try and help people get that little bit further down the line.
Great advice. I hope that helps you, Millie. We've got one more question from Gemma Wilkes. As an independent producer, one of the hardest things I find is getting the scripts to bankable cast through the gatekeeper agents. So many say come back when finance is locked. That just doesn't seem to be possible in the current market without bankable cast on board. Am I missing something?
No, that's pretty true. It's like, yeah, you know, agents won't pass it on to a lot of their actors unless the project's financed. So that's the thing. I mean, I've acted in so many films where I've been told the film's financed, and even we've got down to like the first day of principal photography and they haven't been financed, and you know, but there's a lot of kind of white lies and people telling things, you know. I think you would kind of, if I was talking, so being an actor and having a producer slightly lie to my agent about the thing being finance and greenlit would be, you know, of course I'd be like, you know, I'd want to know the truth, but putting my producer head on, you know, I've had to slightly blur, you know, lines with, you know, actors, agents, when, you know, when we were working with Samantha and Morton and Billy Piper, we kind of nearly had the financing, but, you know, we just needed them to say, you know, give us a letter of intent. So it's that persuasion to get the letter of intent of the agent. So getting a good relationship with agents is really important, and getting, you know, relationships with actors as well. But, you know, that takes a long time. And, you know, even me, who's been in the industry a long time, you know, it's just a constant thing. And that's what's hard work. And Raindance Film School, they always go on about it. It's the schmoozing side. You have to schmooze so much, which I hate, but it's such part of the job. Like even today, you know, I've got a project going on, and, you know, we want to get it to Billy Piper, and it's like, you know, I can do that, but I could do it, but it's always slightly uncomfortable. But I think part of being a producer is you just have to be, you know, gung-ho and just like go for it. But no, just keep going. You know, it
is about network, really is. Really,
yeah,
just
and tell the agent, you know, yeah, it is greenlit.
Get yourself a good casting director. I recently got attached to my feature by a really good casting director.
That's very important as well. A good casting director will make all the difference.
Oh, that's some great piece of advice, and I think that's a great way to end with something that everyone can take away. We've scratched on just the surface, I would say, today. There's so much more we could dive into and even take off the platform, and hopefully we get a chance to continue the conversation at a later date. But thank you all so much for your time today. We have been Bird Box Film Club. I am Urvisha, your host from Big Picture Film Club. For more information on the next event, do follow us and keep in touch at bigpicturefilmclub.com. Thank you all. Bye, guys.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.